Why would a loving God command the complete destruction of an entire people? The story of the Canaanites, a land of abundance hiding dark secrets, is one of the most controversial chapters in the Bible. What made this judgment necessary, and why does it still captivate millions of people thousands of years later? This is not just ancient history. It's a journey of discovery about justice, faith, and the strength to overcome life's greatest challenges. Imagine standing before a barrier that seems impossible to conquer, a fear, a challenge, or a dream that feels out of reach. The Israelites once faced the towering walls and giants of Canaan, yet they were guided by a divine promise. This video will unveil the truth behind God's judgment, the dramatic conquest, and the lessons that can transform how you face difficulties in your life. If you're ready to explore this story, hit the like button now and subscribe with notifications to never miss our upcoming inspiring videos. Let's dive into the untold truth about the Canaanites. A land where golden fields stretch under radiant sunlight, shimmering rivers flow through lush valleys, and hills seem to whisper promises of prosperity. This is Canaan, the land the Bible describes as flowing with milk and honey. But what turned a land as beautiful as paradise into the focal point of God's severe judgment? To uncover this story, one must look beyond its outward beauty and see Canaan's profound role in God's plan. Canaan was not just a resource-rich region. It stood at the crossroads of the ancient world, a bridge connecting great civilizations. From the mountains of Lebanon in the north to the arid Negev desert in the south, from the dazzling Mediterranean coast to the majestic Jordan Valley, Canaan was a hub of trade routes and cultural exchange. Its strategic location made it a hotspot for commerce and religion, where Egypt, Mesopotamia, and other ancient empires converged. But for the Israelites, Canaan was more than a piece of land. It was the symbol of a divine promise. In Genesis, God spoke to Abraham, "To your offspring I will give this land." Genesis 12:7. This promise was not merely about physical territory. It was a covenant for a holy nation, called to carry God's light to the world. Canaan, therefore, was not just a destination on a map, but a stage where God displayed his faithfulness, power, and justice. Yet, as the Israelites approached, they found the land was not empty. It was occupied by powerful peoples, with fortified cities and a culture shrouded in profound darkness. What made a land chosen as a divine promise the setting for a fateful clash between light and darkness? Canaan was not merely a fertile land. It was a spiritual battlefield where holiness and corruption collided, unfolding a story filled with mystery and deep meaning. As the Israelites stood on the edge of the promised land, they did not see a peaceful wilderness. Instead, they faced mighty city-states with towering walls, skilled armies, and warriors that struck fear into their enemies. The Canaanites were not a unified nation, but a collection of independent city-states like Jericho, Hazor, Sidon, and Tyre, each with its own king and power structure. Yet, what caused these formidable cities to fall onto a path leading to destruction? The walls of Jericho, so thick they seemed impregnable, symbolized the Canaanites' physical might. These fortresses were not only built with stone, but guarded by well-trained armies and warriors described in the Bible as giants, descendants of Anak. In Numbers 13:33, Israel's spies reported, "We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." This imagery reflects not just a physical disparity, but the deep fear that gripped the Israelites when facing an enemy that appeared invincible. According to the Bible, the Canaanites were descendants of Ham, one of Noah's 3 sons. After the flood, Noah cursed Ham's lineage through his son Canaan for an act of disrespect. Genesis 9:25. In biblical tradition, this curse laid the groundwork for the Canaanites' moral and spiritual decline over centuries. But it was not just the curse that shaped their fate. The Canaanites built a complex society, with cities serving as centers of trade, art, and religion. They had skilled artisans, bustling trade routes, and a rich culture. Yet behind this prosperity lay a deep darkness. Their religious practices pushed them to the brink of judgment. Despite their strength, these city-states were not united. Each operated independently, sometimes in competition, creating a fragmented society bound by a shared culture. This blend of military power and spiritual corruption made the Canaanites a threat not only to Israel, but to God's redemptive plan. What was it about their culture that God could not tolerate, leading to a command for their complete destruction? To understand why God ordered the destruction of the Canaanites, one must confront a shocking reality. Their culture was not just different, it was steeped in practices that horrified the ancient world. How far can a society fall to turn cruelty into a celebrated ritual? The Canaanites worshipped a pantheon of gods, from El, the chief deity in their mythology, to Asherah, the goddess of fertility, and Baal, the god of rain, storms, and harvests. But their worship went far beyond offerings or prayers, descending into acts the Bible calls detestable, confirmed by startling archaeological discoveries. Picture temples where rituals were not mere prayers, but included sacred prostitution to appease gods like Asherah and Baal. Men and women engaged in public sexual acts, believing these would bring bountiful harvests or divine blessings. But the depravity went further. Archaeological records from sites like Giza, Megiddo, and Ugaritic texts from ancient Syria reveal stone altars where the Canaanites performed child sacrifices. Innocent children were burned alive or offered to gods like Moloch, in the belief that such sacrifices ensured prosperity or protection. These acts, temple prostitution, incest, and child sacrifice, were not the deeds of a few rogue individuals, but part of an official religious system. Ugaritic texts describe these rituals in detail, showing that the Canaanites' depravity was not just a biblical accusation, but corroborated by external historical sources. These practices were not mere cultural differences. They directly offended God's holiness, challenging the moral foundation He established for humanity. How far can a people go when they turn cruelty into a symbol of their spiritual life? The command to destroy the Canaanites may perplex or even shock many, but when considering the extent of their depravity, the question shifts from "Why did God do this?" to "Why did He wait so long?" What happens when a people reject truth and sink deeper into sin, exhausting God's patience? To understand this judgment, one must consider the nature of God's justice and mercy, two attributes that coexist in the Bible. The Canaanites did not merely worship other gods. They built a culture and religion that glorified corruption, from public prostitution to child sacrifice on altars. These acts not only violated God's moral principles, but caused immeasurable suffering to their own people. Children were robbed of life, families were torn apart, and society was trapped in a cycle of unrelenting depravity. In God's eyes, these were not just sins. They destroyed the very essence of humanity He created. Genesis 15:16 records God's words to Abraham. His descendants would receive Canaan only after 4 generations because the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. This shows God did not rush to judgment. He gave the Canaanites centuries to repent and turn to truth, but they did not. Instead, they sank deeper into darkness, making their detestable practices an inseparable part of their culture and religion. The command to destroy them was not a cruel act, but an act of justice to protect the Israelites from being drawn into a culture that could shatter their covenant with God. This judgment was not just about punishing the Canaanites, but about safeguarding God's redemptive plan for humanity. If the Israelites, newly freed from Egyptian slavery, were influenced by these practices, they could lose their holy identity. How could a holy and just God tolerate a society built on cruelty and idolatry. The command to destroy was a reminder that God's justice protects His plan to bring life and hope to the world. After 4 decades of wandering in the desert, the Israelites finally stood on the threshold of the Promised Land, where God's covenant with Abraham was about to become reality. But what could cause a people who witnessed God's power through the parting of the Red Sea to be paralyzed by fear before a new challenge? Before entering Canaan, God commanded Moses to send 12 spies, each representing a tribe, to scout the land. Numbers 13:1-2. Their mission was to observe the terrain, cities, resources, and inhabitants preparing for the great conquest. Yet their report shook the entire community, turning hope into despair. 10 of the 12 spies returned with eyes filled with terror. They described fortified city-states with towering walls, well-trained armies, and, most frighteningly, giant warriors, descendants of Anak. In Numbers 13:28-33, they reported, "The land is indeed fertile, but its people are strong. The cities are fortified, and we saw giants there. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." The grasshopper imagery not only highlights the physical disparity, but also captures the profound fear and sense of helplessness before an enemy that appeared unconquerable. The soaring walls, towering giants, and vast armies became symbols of impossibility in their eyes. This fear spread rapidly, like a fire consuming the people's courage. They forgot the mighty miracles God had performed. From the 10 plagues that struck Egypt, to the pillar of cloud and fire guiding them through the desert, to the manna falling from heaven to sustain them. Instead of trusting God's promise that Canaan belonged to them, they let their minds be dominated by physical obstacles. In Numbers 14:1-4, the people wept, complained, and even demanded to return to Egypt, the land of their former enslavement. This doubt was not merely a lack of faith, it was a betrayal of their covenant with God, a rejection of their identity as His chosen people. The consequences of this doubt were severe. In Numbers 14:29-34, God declared that this generation would not enter the Promised Land. They were condemned to wander in the desert for another 40 years, 1 year for each day the spies scouted the land, until all the adults, except Joshua and Caleb, perished. This event reveals a profound lesson. When nurtured, fear can overshadow even the clearest evidence of God's power. How can one face the giants in life without being overwhelmed by fear? The answer lies in 2 figures who stood out amidst the panicked crowd: Joshua and Caleb, who chose faith over fear. Amid the storm of fear and doubt, Joshua and Caleb emerged as 2 radiant beacons, igniting hope in the darkness. What enabled these 2 to stand firm while others trembled? They did not deny the harsh reality: the towering walls, mighty armies, and giant warriors of Canaan. But instead of being swayed by the enemy, they fixed their hearts on God, the one who promised Canaan to the Israelites. In Numbers 14:7-9, they stood before the people and declared with astonishing courage, "The land we explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, He will lead us into that land. Do not be afraid of the people there, for the Lord is with us." This declaration was not blind confidence. Joshua and Caleb understood that the conquest of Canaan was not just a military campaign, but a spiritual journey where victory hinged on trust and obedience to God. They did not dismiss the danger of the enemy, but they believed God's power surpassed every obstacle. Their faith was a conviction that God's promise, made to Abraham centuries earlier, would never fail. They saw the same reality as the other 10 spies, but through the lens of faith, they perceived opportunity instead of defeat, promise instead of peril. Sadly, the voices of Joshua and Caleb were drowned out by the people's panic. Swept up in fear, the Israelites not only refused to listen, but rebelled, even threatening to stone the 2, Numbers 14:10. This reaction shows that doubt not only weakens courage, but also turns people against those who bring hope. Joshua and Caleb had to wait, along with the new generation, to enter the promised land. Yet their steadfastness testifies to the power of faith. When faced with seemingly impossible challenges, trust in God can transform giants into foes that can be overcome. Can such faith inspire anyone to confront the great challenges in their own journey? After 40 years of wandering, the new generation of Israelites, led by Joshua, was ready to enter Canaan. But how could they overcome the fortified walls and mighty armies of a land that terrified their predecessors? The conquest of Canaan was not merely a military campaign, but a series of miracles and lessons in obedience, proving that victory comes from God's power, not human strength. The first event marking the conquest was the miracle of crossing the Jordan River. In Joshua 3:14-17, as the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant stepped into the Jordan, swollen with flood waters, the river suddenly stopped, forming an invisible wall, leaving a dry path for the Israelites to cross. This miracle was not just a divine feat, but a powerful reminder. The God who parted the Red Sea to free Israel from Egypt was still with them, ready to pave the way through the impossible. Imagine millions of Israelites, from children to elders, crossing the river on dry ground, led by the Ark of the Covenant, a symbol of God's presence. This event not only strengthened the people's faith, but also sent a message to the Canaanite nations. The God of Israel is almighty. The Battle of Jericho stands as the pinnacle of the conquest, an enduring symbol of faith and obedience. Jericho, with walls so thick they were deemed impregnable, was Canaan's strongest fortress. Yet God did not command the use of catapults, arrows, or conventional military tactics. Instead, He gave a peculiar plan. The Israelites were to march around the city in silence for 6 days, once each day, led by the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant. On the 7th day, they were to circle 7 times, blow trumpets, and shout. Joshua 6:1-5. To any strategist of that era, this plan might have seemed absurd. But the Israelites' absolute obedience led to an unimaginable miracle. As the trumpets sounded and the people shouted, Jericho's walls collapsed, paving the way for victory. The triumph at Jericho was not just a military event, but a testament to the power of obedience. The Israelites relied not on weapons or numbers, but on trust in God. Later battles, such as at Gibeon, Joshua 10, where God made the sun stand still to ensure Israel's victory, further reinforced this lesson. When people obey, God acts beyond imagination. If God can make the mightiest walls fall with a single shout, what barriers can His power break in one's life? The resounding victory at Jericho filled the Israelites with confidence. But what happens when obedience is broken? The battle at Ai, a city far smaller than Jericho, unexpectedly ended in humiliating defeat. In Joshua 7, the story of Achan reveals the cause. One Israelite disobeyed God's command by keeping spoils from Jericho that were meant to be destroyed. This act was not just a personal violation, but brought sin upon the entire community, causing them to lose God's protection. The defeat at Ai serves as a stern warning. Holiness and obedience are prerequisites for receiving victory. Achan, by keeping valuable items, a beautiful robe, gold and silver, Joshua 7:21, placed greed above God's command. This act led not only to military failure, but also to painful losses, with 36 Israelites killed in the battle. Joshua 7:5. Only when Achan's sin was exposed and dealt with did Israel regain victory at Ai. Joshua 8. This event is more than a story of failure. It reflects the deeper reason behind the conquest of Canaan. Just as the Canaanites' corrupt culture threatened to draw Israel into sin, Achan's disobedience shows that even a single small transgression can have grave consequences for a community. This lesson echoes through generations. Obedience is not just a personal matter, but the foundation for maintaining a relationship with God. Can a single mistake derail God's great plan for a people or an individual? Canaan was not merely a region on an ancient map, but a profound symbol of a greater promise, a life of fulfillment God reserved for His people. Why did a land once stained by depravity become an image of hope and victory? To understand this, one must look beyond Canaan's lush hills and fertile valleys to see it as an invitation to a deeper relationship with God. In the Bible, Canaan was not just a material reward for the Israelites after years of slavery and wandering. It symbolized a life guided by God, where people could find peace, purpose, and communion with their Creator. The promise to give Canaan to Abraham, Genesis 12:7, was not only about land, but a sacred covenant. The Israelites would become a holy nation, reflecting God's light to the world. In Joshua 21:43-45, after the conquest of Canaan, the Bible records, "The Lord gave Israel all the land He had sworn to give their ancestors. Not one of all the Lord's good promises failed." This demonstrates that Canaan was a testament to God's faithfulness, even when His people faced seemingly impossible challenges. Yet Canaan also served as a reminder that God's promises do not come easily. The Israelites had to fight to claim the promised land, confronting fortified city-states and fearsome warriors. This struggle was not just about territory, but about preserving their holy identity against the temptations of a corrupt culture. Thus, Canaan became a symbol for anyone yearning for a fuller life, one that demands perseverance, faith, and commitment to God. Could a land once shrouded in darkness become a beacon of hope for those who trust in God? The conquest of Canaan was not merely a military campaign, but a spiritual battle between God's holiness and the corruption of idolatry. What compelled God to order the destruction not only of the people, but also of their altars and idols? The answer lies in the danger of idols, not just statues of stone or wood, but ideas, practices, and lifestyles that draw people away from the truth. The Canaanites worshipped gods like Baal, Asherah, and Moloch, engaging in rituals that led to moral decay, as noted earlier. But the threat of these idols extended beyond their detestable practices. They represented a value system opposed to God's intent. Instead of honoring life and justice, they promoted cruelty and lust. God's command in Deuteronomy 7:5 instructed the Israelites to destroy the altars, smash the idols, and leave no trace of that culture. Why? Because even a single remaining altar could become a temptation, luring Israel away from their covenant with God. Later, history proved this true. In the books of Judges and Kings, the Israelites repeatedly fell into idolatry when they failed to eradicate Canaanite altars, leading to spiritual decline and painful consequences. For example, in Judges 2:11-13, the Israelites abandoned the Lord to worship Baal and Asherah, resulting in the loss of God's protection and oppression by other nations. The battle against idolatry was thus not just about destroying objects, but about safeguarding the soul and identity of a nation. This lesson transcends the era of Israel. Idols are not only statues, they are anything that takes God's place in the heart, from personal ambitions to society's distorted values. The conquest of Canaan reminds us that to enter God's promise, one must be ready to tear down the altars within. How can one recognize and confront the hidden idols in their life? The conquest of Canaan was not just a story about a land, but a part of God's grand plan of redemption. Why does an event from thousands of years ago still hold meaning today? The answer lies in how Canaan foreshadows the ultimate victory of Jesus over sin and death, offering the promise of eternal life. In the Old Testament, Canaan symbolized the promise of rest, a place where the Israelites could live in communion with God. Yet, even after conquering the land, history shows they never achieved complete rest. disobedience and idolatry led Israel into cycles of sin and judgment. Hebrews 4:8-11 explains that Canaan was not the ultimate destination. If Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken later about another day. True rest comes only through Jesus, who offers eternal peace to those who trust in him. Thus, the conquest of Canaan prefigures Jesus' victory. Just as the Israelites faced fortified cities and corrupt idols, Jesus confronted sin and the power of death on the cross. In Colossians 2:15, the Bible describes how Jesus disarmed the powers and authorities, triumphing over them by the cross. Canaan was a promise of a land, but Jesus brings the promise of eternal life, a spiritual Canaan where people are freed from sin and live in communion with God. God's holiness and justice, shown through the judgment of the Canaanites, always pair with his mercy. The command to destroy was not the end, but a preparation for a greater redemptive plan, where Jesus becomes the Savior for all nations, including those once in darkness. If Canaan was an image of the promise, Jesus is its fulfillment. Can a redemptive plan that began thousands of years ago bring hope to today's challenges? Canaan is not just a historical tale. It is an invitation for anyone longing for a fuller life. What makes this story resonate in the modern world? Canaan represents the dreams, purposes, and peace God offers each person. Yet, to enter one's own Canaan, one must face giants, temptations, fears, or habits that pull them away from God. Imagine a life where the pressures of the world, personal ambitions, societal expectations, or subtle temptations are replaced by God's peace and purpose. Just as the Israelites had to tear down Canaan's altars, each person is called to identify and remove the idols in their heart, things that take God's place, like the pursuit of wealth, fame, or destructive habits. God's call to Joshua, "Be strong and courageous," Joshua 1:9, still echoes today, urging everyone to face challenges with faith and obedience. The conquest of Canaan teaches that victory comes not from human strength, but from trust in God. Like the Israelites crossing the Jordan and witnessing Jericho's walls fall, anyone who trusts God can see life's barriers crumble. Whether it's fear of failure, worldly temptations, or past wounds, God is there, ready to lead to a fuller life. What is your Canaan? A dream, a goal, or a deeper spiritual life? And what will you do to fight for it? The story of the Canaanites and the conquest of the Promised Land is not just a chapter in the Bible, but a powerful reminder that God always guides his people through the greatest challenges, from fortified walls to the deepest fears within. Through this journey, from trembling spies before giants to the triumphant fall of Jericho, from disobedience leading to defeat to the miracles of trust, one truth shines clear: when God is with you, no barrier is insurmountable. But this story does not end in the past. It is a call for each person to find strength and hope in their own journey. Now, it's your turn to act. If the Canaan story has sparked reflection, leave a comment below and share what struck you most. Was it the miracle of Jericho's walls collapsing? Or the courage of Joshua and Caleb facing impossible odds? Your thoughts will help build a community of people passionate about exploring profound biblical stories. Don't forget to hit the like button to support this video and share it with friends, family, or anyone who might find inspiration in this story. Subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications to never miss our upcoming videos, where we'll continue diving into inspiring biblical stories, from mighty miracles to life-changing lessons. Each video is a chance to discover how the Bible can illuminate your path in the modern world. Remember, the God who led Israel across the Jordan and brought down city walls is still at work today. Whatever challenges you face, a fear, a barrier, or a dream that seems out of reach, step forward with courage, trusting that God is with you, guiding you to a future filled with hope. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next journey. May you find the strength to face every challenge and walk in the light of God's divine promise.